Guys, I'm gonna give it just a couple more minutes. I know we're right at 10, but it looks like based on the registration log that we're only just a little over half of the people registered that are in. So I'm just gonna give it just a minute or so. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Shannon with the association. We are going to go ahead and get started while we continue to let the individuals in. This is the first in a series of website trainings and best practices. Chuck will be doing this training, and he has done numerous for us before, so a lot of you have probably already been on one of his trainings. And just remember to drop your name and the district that you're with in the chat box. And through this training, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box. Chuck will be stopping a couple of times during this training to answer any questions. And Chuck, if you're ready, we can go ahead and get started.
Sure, be happy to. I'm really excited to be with you all today. I am Chuck Moran. I'm the owner and chief ball guy at Ball Guy Studio in Charlottesville. And I've been building websites for 25 years, which doesn't seem actually possible to me, but that's the case. I have picked up a few things along the way, and I'm excited to be able to share some of those things that I've picked up with you through this series of workshops. I've created some slides for this presentation. If you were able to get the ones that were sent out this morning, great. If not, we can resend those at the end of the training, and the second set that I've got has a little bit more information on them. So let's see what we're going to be recording this as well. So if you need to dip back into this at some point because of any reason you needed to take a break during the trainings, there will be a video, so you'll be able to go back and watch those at a future time if you like. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get into my slides. So here we go. So this is the website workshop. All of these trainings are going to be focused on various components of website creation and updating, because I know in a lot of cases, most of you all already have a website. You're built on several different types of platforms, from WordPress to Wix to Squarespace. And that was very gratifying to find out. And I really want to thank you all of you who submitted your information through the questionnaire, which really gave me a good heads up on what to expect today. I also want to suggest that in some cases, you may want to rework your website, whether you want to keep on the same platform or not. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is to give you some best practices that will help guide that reworking if you choose to do that. And if you don't have a website, I hope to share information that will allow you to build one from scratch effectively. So today is all about best practices. What we're going to be covering today is a number of things that are key to making a website really work properly. So we're going to be covering things like the importance of optimizing images, ranking in search engines, and how to think about the design of your website. And of course, the design of the website is evolving constantly. There are trends that are out there, and it seems to me that we've sort of settled into a really nice space of basically big, open, bold, and short copy. So we're going to get into some of that as we go through. So next Tuesday, what we're going to be covering will be how to create a free or low-cost website on WordPress.com. So this would be a good training if you don't have a website, but if you're just curious about WordPress.com, then by all means join us next Tuesday at the same time. And then the following Tuesday on the 19th, we're going to be talking about my favorite and what I have the most experience with around websites, which are what we call self-hosted WordPress websites, which are also known as WordPress.org. And I know some of these terms are a little confusing, but we will be diving into the distinguishing characteristics between those as we go. So let's take a quick look at the history of the web. Just move this window down here a little bit. Okay, so the internet, as we know it today, is basically a collection of networks that they didn't all merge because, of course, you want things like the Defense Department and high security organizations to have their networks separate from the internet, meaning connected to the internet backbone. But the internet really has grown significantly from the 50s and 60s. Back in those days, there was a discrete network put up by airline folks for reservations, for instance, called Sabre. And of course, the Defense Department came out with a whole bunch of different things that they were working on. And over time, of course, it's just merged until now we kind of talk about the internet as the network of all networks. So what we now call the World Wide Web was actually created in 1989, 1990 timeframe by a scientist named Tim Berners-Lee. He's pretty much credited with being the daddy of what we call the World Wide Web. He is a British physicist, and he's still going. And what he was credited with doing was thinking through how, up until that time, when people wanted to be able to share information, it was really a matter of downloading. Even if you could get to another server in those days, in the late 80s and early 90s, you were basically forced to download a copy of a particular research document or that kind of thing. So what Tim Berners-Lee came up with was a way to connect those research papers on this thing that eventually we now call the World Wide Web. So he's actually the guy that created HTML. I know you've all heard of HTML and you've heard of HTTP or HTTPS. Well, HTML does stand for Hypertext Markup Language, and HTTP is one of the transfer protocols that comprise the World Wide Web. So there are also a number of protocols out there, FTP, TCP/IP. There are a bunch of alphabet soup things that I'm not going to bore you with at all today, and honestly don't know a lot about anyway, so I'm just going to skip over those. But basically what happened was when Berners-Lee started promulgating this new context and way for people to connect their research papers, it became a worldwide web of information because people were literally connecting strands from one place to another to be able to share information. And then bringing it up to the current day, the amazing stat that I was kind of amazed at this one myself is that around half of the world's population had access or did access the internet last year in 2020. So we're talking about some 4.5 billion people that have been able to get into the World Wide Web and the internet, as we call it today. So let's just talk about how I got happily caught in the World Wide Web. As for my own involvement, I got my first Macintosh in 1985. I've taught at the University of Virginia at the Women's Center, and those undergraduate women, I'm always feeling comfortable by saying, I got my first Mac before you were on the planet. So I've been at this a while, and I've enjoyed watching the technology change over that time. I also subscribed in 1989 to a really kind of crappy service called the GE Genie, but it was all that there was out there then. It was black type. Some of you are familiar with this old style, or I'm sorry, black screen with green type on it. And that's what the GE Genie was. And I connected to it with an extremely slow modem. In 1994, I was very happy to be invited to a thing at the University of Virginia called the Hopper Project. Hopper was named for Grace Hopper, who was one of the few women pioneers of the early internet. And I went to a demonstration of something that still, when I think back to how it blew my mind, I can see how I got caught up in this thing called the World Wide Web. What happened was there was an overhead projection presentation of basically of web pages. So this is 1994, 1995, right in there. What was on the screen was yellow pages with black type on them. And every once in a while, there was a blue word or a blue phrase. And the presenter said, watch what happens when I click on these blue words. Well, when she did, the whole page would zoom up and she would be at a different place on the page. And everybody was agog at that. That was, stunning information that you could do that. And then she said, okay, watch this. And she would click on another word and it would take you to an entirely different document. That was just an amazing thing. And it really blew a lot of minds. So following that, I really got caught up in the whole idea of the web. I went in 1995 to work for internet service provider Cornerstone Networks here in Charlottesville. And I am still kicking myself because in those days, domains were free. Yep, you could get a domain simply by asking for it. Yes, there was a process of application, but you could actually just get a name. You could not get a trademark. Well, actually, you could get a trademark name, but you were quickly pushed off of that by a judge in a court. So Armani.com, somebody tried to get that. Armani didn't have it. And a court had to intercede and say, no, that's not yours. It belongs to Armani. But what I'm still kicking myself for is that I did not go out and register a bunch of generics like hotdogs.com. Maybe baseball.com was available back in those days. So anyway, I am still kicking myself about that. So I started to learn HTML somewhere in the mid 90s and got a job at UVA for which I was responsible for pulling 5,000 web pages, believe it or not, into a consistent system. They were distributed across a bunch of different servers. And I needed to create a design system as well as a way for us to continue to have the content generated by people who had been lovingly creating content that was all disconnected from everybody else. So obviously, as you can imagine, I've been witness to incredible growth and change since those early days and those slow modems. So let's take a look at what a website is anyway. Techopedia describes it this way. It's a website. The website is a collection of publicly accessible, interlinked web pages that share a single domain name. Websites can be created and maintained by an individual group, business, or organization to serve a variety of purposes. And together, all of these publicly accessible websites constitute the World Wide Web. So, basic question here, people. Does your organization even need a website? Yes, you absolutely need a website. I'm pretty sure you knew that was coming. So, think back to the progression that we've been through over the last 30 years. Believe it or not, the fax machine was actually created in the 1800s. There was a predecessor to the modern fax machines back from the 1800s. But they really took on popularity in the 1980s. And you all probably remember us saying to each other, hey, what's your fax number? Because that was the vogue way to communicate. We could send documents over the telephone. It was amazing. Um, then it moved on to what's your email address? And now people want to know what your website address is. So whether you're an artist, you're a small business owner, you represent an enterprise level company, a nonprofit, a public facing agency that looks out for the public good like you all do, having a website is an absolutely essential part of being taken seriously these days. It increases credibility, and without one, people may actually question your legitimacy. Just a quick story about my friend Elaine. I have a friend who is, I wouldn't say technophobic. Yes, actually I would. She's a little bit on the technophobic side. Very right brain, very artistic. She's actually literally a painter and a very successful one. And I had another friend who consulted with artists. So I was trying to introduce Elaine to this other woman who does consultations and helps artists with their marketing. So I said to Elaine, you know what? I've got a friend I'd like to introduce you to. And Elaine, my technophobic, I'm not going on the web unless I have to, friend said, what's her web address? And I said, well, I hate to tell you this, but she doesn't have a website. She's just not ever gotten around to it. And Elaine said to me, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. If she doesn't have a website, there's no way for me to really check her out. So I'm just going to take a hard pass on that. So just like with interpersonal relationships, the first impression your organization makes is crucial to how it's perceived. So there are many ways that we are introduced as an organization, which is obviously a set of people. Many of those initial introductions are done in person at conferences and that kind of thing. But the first time that many people will find your district in your organization will be through the internet. They'll put in search terms into a search engine, find you, and then they land on your website. Well, this is where you have an absolutely golden opportunity to make a first impression. And so if your website is less than, it doesn't really communicate, it's not all that great in terms of design, then you've really kind of passed up a really great opportunity to build credibility and bring people into your orbit. So it obviously needs to fulfill needs. So this one, I was laughing about this. So how do people actually find your organization? Well, it is through search engines. But if your first thought was Google, welcome to the 21st century. That's how we do it these days. Excuse me. I'll bet few, if any of you thought, you know what, I guess they look up my organization in the phone book or see an ad in the local newspaper. So let's take a look at the global search engines. Google here, like you might imagine, is the total dominating factor. When people find you online, they're also finding your website along with your social media. When they type in search term, which we look at as keywords, into a search engine like Google, Bing, or Yahoo, Google is, of course, the default standard when it comes to search. And the search engine excuse me, pays attention to all the keywords in the search query. And if your website is really fully as SEO optimized, then it will show up, hopefully on page one. So let's just take a look at these stats. Bing, which you would think is a pretty good sized search engine. Excuse me, let me take a little sip here. Look at the differential between Google and Bing. And Yahoo, which a lot of you probably use, is down at 1.54%. Baidu is a Chinese search engine. Yandex is Russian. And all of the others, of which there are hundreds, if not thousands, of search engines. There are all kinds of discrete ones that look up just images or just this or just that type of data. All of those others collected together only comprise 1.6%. SEO, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, does stand for search engine optimization. So how do you get ranking in search engines? Well, there are a couple of ways that you can do it. We're going to talk a lot about SEO today, but you can pay to play. Google is very happy to have you buy ads. And I have to say that in the right circumstance, Google ads really do work. You will see them at the top of a search engine result. A lot of times I personally skip over those and go to something else a little bit further down in the search results. But if you want to be shown at the top of a page and guarantee it to a certain extent, you have to pay to play. So although it's not part of your website, you can greatly enhance your SEO by what they call the Google My Business or GMB profile. This is mine for Bald Guy Studio, and I'm proud of the fact that I have 25 Google reviews, and I'm hitting a 5.0 average. The nice thing is that I do have a 4.9 in that group of 25. And but by getting more and more and more reviews piled on top, the math just works out and it dwarfs that 4.9. So I'm hitting a 5.0 average. But what happens when people when they search for you and they find your Google My Business review or Google My Business profile, they make decisions on whether to visit your website or not. This is especially true for things like restaurants and other types of retail outlets. It's been said that people will pull into a city, pull out their phone, it's dinner time, they'll go into Google, they'll type in restaurants near me, and they'll see pizza, and they'll see a couple of other different kinds of restaurants. And when they tap through to those and see their Google My Business profile, one of the first things they look at, of course, is the number of stars. Well, if your star rating as a restaurant is 3.2, and the next restaurant down at the other end of the street is 4.5, and there are no other distinguishing characteristics, guess which one you're going to go eat at, given no other input, such as menu and price and that kind of thing. So it's really important to pay attention to this, to having a Google My Business profile. If you don't have one, all you need is a Gmail account, basically a Google account, and you can go set up a GMB yourself and start using it. What's cool about it is it's free. Like so much of Google stuff, it's free. You can consider it an auxiliary website. What's cool about it is that you can put posts up on it, announcements, listing of your services, your hours, your phone number, on and on and on. So Google's not really trying to compete with your website. So that's not the idea. What they are doing is helping people find you. In the long run, of course, what they're trying to do is provide good experience for their users, as well as, guess what, build advertising revenue when you think, okay, well, this is working, maybe I should advertise a little bit more on Google. The other thing is the value of reviews. And I can't overstate the impact of these reviews. We just talked about pizza restaurants, but people do look at those reviews and they pay attention to them and they will make choices based on them. Now, that's so true for things like restaurants. When we're talking about soil and water conservation districts, it's not as important, of course, but if you can get reviews on here on your Google My Business profile, that will help your search engine optimization, because when people do type in keywords that they're looking for, your GMB will show up and they will click through, see some of your posts, and hopefully go on to get more information from your website. So here's some more reasons that I think you really do need to have a website. Your website helps you connect with people all over the globe. Now, for Virginia soil and water conservation districts, this may seem like a completely unnecessary advantage. Why would you really want to connect globally? You're not selling widgets, around the world. You're not engaged in, you're not selling art classes. I've got a client who does art trainings and teaches. He went from having no people outside of his area around DC to having people in India and Chicago and California taking classes from him. But the reason I put this note in here in this slide is that I actually have a client who's in somewhat a similar situation to you all, in the sense that they have a service-oriented organization in Indianapolis. Because they were on the web, they made a connection. They were contacted by a collaborator in New York State, and I don't know whether it was a funding agency or a collaboration of services or what came out of that, but they never would have been found had they not had a website and not had it at least somewhat SEO optimized. So another thing that's an advantage to having a website is it can easily eliminate routine office interruptions. As you all know, many organizations get calls from their clients and prospective clients asking simple questions like location and hours of operation. Are you open on this holiday and that kind of thing? Customers want their needs met swiftly, which means calls and emails can disrupt your organization's focus on more important things that really do need to be done. So having an up-to-date website with your hours and contact information is a great solution for today's high-tech customer who is looking for that information online. They are not looking you up in the phone book, getting your number and calling you to find out some of this basic stuff. They're just going to go find it online, and let's not frustrate them. Let's give them as good a user experience as we can. So your website is also a great place to post announcements since it's on 24/7, 365. If you have an upcoming event, in addition to your social media, having it prominently displayed on your homepage is recommended for getting the word out. Organizations with regular events would do well to have a separate panel or page that's dedicated to their events calendar. There are good plugins that manage events. I'm showing one here. This is literally called the events calendar. It works with WordPress. And what it does is allow you to go into an interface on the back end and update simple things like who's showing up, who's playing, and it also includes Google Maps. So if you're hosting events at various locations, you can actually set up a default for each one of those locations. So all you have to do is click on that and say, this person is doing this at this time at that particular location. So is social media enough? This is something that I hear often. And while it's a good question, I do think that we need to basically say, no, it's not enough. I do recommend social media. There's no question about it. To cover your bases, I recommend that you have both a website and social media because of the ways and places that people consume information these days. Not everybody's on every platform. Not everybody's interested in going to your website every time they want to learn something. If they're already on Facebook and they're looking at cat pictures and keeping up with their grandkids, then they've got a good chance of encountering your information on that platform. And of course, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get information out about your organization. So Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and others can be great outlets to share content with new audiences who otherwise may not find you, but they're still limited to the audience that is engaged on that platform. So no, I'm not saying that you need to be on all the platforms. You need to be on ones that you know you can keep up to date and that resonate with your particular following. So I wouldn't think that your following in this particular case are really big TikTokers, but they could be. So I always recommend trying and seeing what happens. Of course, this, keeping up social media is obviously a big resource hog for staff. So it's important to have social presence on these sites as part of your digital marketing effort, but you must remember that not all of your fans are hanging out. That's why it's so important that you build your SEO and that kind of thing to keep the magnetized effort going to your website. So one of the things I've heard for a million years in this marketing space is don't build on rented land. And man, I swear I didn't hack Facebook yesterday to make this point, but if you are building your social media and all of your marketing presence on Facebook or Facebook and Instagram, You were out of luck yesterday for 6 hours, 6 whole hours, and they still don't really know. As far last time I checked, they don't really know what it was that took those big giant platforms down. So don't build on rented land just means work with platforms that you really can control. I'm not saying don't build on rented land in the sense that you shouldn't be, that you shouldn't have a presence there. You should, but don't put all your eggs in that basket. So one of the big issues is that these guys have gotten really, really big, and it's really hard to get seen in organic search if somebody's looking for or getting seen through just organically being on these platforms. The other thing is that they've gotten so big that it's really difficult to contact support. What would you do if your Facebook page suddenly was doing something completely different? Well, you'd probably Google it to find out, or look through Facebook and see who else is posting about it. But you're really limited. You can't contact support easily. If you're a paying customer, yes, you can get an ad representative that will help you out. But it really can be hard to get answers to particular questions. So your website is different. Typically, the websites don't go down. Typically, websites are up 99 point. They talk about 5 nines. A lot of these websites take a great pride in being up 99.999% of the time. That's the 5 nines. And the key thing to keep in mind is that your website and your email marketing are really the only 2 platforms that you quote unquote own. Yes, they can go down, there can be glitches, but those are the ones that you can manage. You manage the content on them. You manage the hosting for them. You manage the SEO for your website. So you have complete control over those. If you feel like doing an email marketing message to people around the holidays, you have control over that. You can send that out. And again, going back to Facebook and the other social media platforms, the only people who are going to see an announcement are the ones who happen to see it right at that moment, unless you're putting ad money behind it. So my bottom line on this section of my training today is that website plus social is a smart marketing strategy. So I'm going to stop here and stop sharing my screen and take some questions if anybody has any. So if one of the moderators wants to hop on and help me with that, that would be great. If people have questions, I'll be happy to do what I can to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions? You can put those in the chat box for me.
Chuck, this has been really helpful. You had a few questions on search engine optimization, and I think those have kind of been answered in the chat box itself. You've got some folks also who are really itching to better understand what their website should include, what it looks like, how should we up our ante with our current websites. And I think and hope that's where you're headed.
That's exactly where I'm headed. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm very, very much headed into that direction. So we're going to be talking about SEO. I'm going to
one last question before you head into that. How often do you recommend we update our email and social media? Facebook, Instagram?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually do have a slide about reviewing your website. You really should do you should do a top to bottom review of your website twice a year minimum. Quarterly's better, monthly's even better. And the reason for that is, and this happens to me as a website guy, I'll go back to one of my pages. In fact, I just did this the other day on one of my websites, and I was like, holy crap, why is that still there? And it's because I didn't take it off. It's hopelessly out of date. I didn't mean to leave it up there, but I have not followed my own advice about doing a regular review. So that really is important that people do that. Social media, it depends on the platform. And I would say that and honestly, this is another thing I would do with Google, is just go ask Google. What is and look for, and always put 2021 into your query. So if you're looking for best times or high frequency of posting on Facebook, just limit it to that. Don't say Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest. Do them one platform at a time and see what people are saying these days, but go to people who actually seem like they know what they're talking about. That said, I would say that you want to be on Facebook about 3 times a week. Instagram is about the same. If you're on Twitter, the life of a tweet is 12 seconds. So you pretty much have to dump a ton of content on Twitter to make any difference. I don't really look at Twitter as a significant marketing platform. Some people do, but it depends on the industry. I will say one other quick thing about social media that may not be widely known, and that I've heard from a number of my social media marketing colleagues, and that is that Pinterest is the strongest website traffic driver of all the platforms. Pinterest is the strongest website driver of all the platforms out there. So obviously Pinterest has a reputation for being oriented toward females. It is about probably these days 75-25 in terms of gender split. More and more men are going on there. I think it has a reputation of being pretty much about the home and vacations and that kind of thing. There is a ton of goodness about Pinterest. So if you have a Instagram strategy because you're creating really great photographs, start thinking about getting on Pinterest as well, because that is photograph oriented as well.
2 last questions that I think you're going to probably head into next. One is, well, maybe 3 last questions. For some of us, we have multiple folks on staff, and the best way to tackle a website is that each of us have our own responsible pages that we are for. Recognizing districts and our audience has to try to find ways to balance that. If there is an option though, do you recommend one person be responsible for website updates, or is there some benefit to trying to ensure staff are cross-trained and multiple folks are taking care of certain areas?
Yeah.
We've got a couple others, and then one that was sent to me specifically is, what specifically should we be really trying to craft on our homepage and otherwise that will draw people in? What should that web page actually look like visually?
Yeah, well, I will be dealing with the homepage specifically in just a few minutes. But to your question about maintenance of content, I think of things, and I'll talk about this in a minute as well. I think of things from a top-down perspective. I think in terms of systems. So I would include into my system where I'm talking about branding guidelines. So a system that's consistent across all of your marketing of fonts, colors, logo usage. Included in that is tone of voice. So if you've got 3 people on your staff that are taking care of 3 different areas on your website, and they can pretty much sound like each other, that's going to be ideal. Now, typically, we're not talking about copy that is going to vary a whole lot from one person to another. So I wouldn't put a huge amount of emphasis on that, because all of the people in your organization are speaking for the organization and know the history and values and what your constituency needs. But it is something to have a conversation about. And I think periodically, maybe in that semi-annual review, somebody like the director should take a look at those 3 different people's content and make sure that they really are being balanced in terms of tone of voice. I would say in terms of maintenance, I was gratified that a number of people consider themselves to be at least average on maintenance when we got our survey results back. And by that, I mean, for WordPress in particular, maintaining the back end with plugins, updates, backups, and things like that. There were a number of people who felt like they were pretty competent with that. That is something that I would have one person do. that is fraught with danger to have multiple people in there like, hey, I think I'll just log in there and update all those plugins. And then that's the person who's not as fully experienced as somebody else, and the site goes down, and that's not a good thing. So I would isolate that to one person. So any other questions? Let's see, let me take a quick look here in the chat. Let's see. Yeah, thank you for mentioning Monday's outage. It reinforces why everyone needs a website and shouldn't only rely on social media. Yeah, exactly. We went over the single person. I've noticed a lot of our farmers actually use Twitter, and it may be worth it to update information on different social media that's curated to our different audiences. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll talk in a little bit about, and I'm talking to myself when I say this, recommending this to myself, is ask your audience. If you want to know where they are on social media, ask them. It's not hard to do. You can email, you can do what you can call them up, but do what you need to do to find out where they are. And if they're on Twitter a whole bunch because of their age demographic or some other demographic, then put content out there. See, I saw Wayne Webb waving. How do you like that alliteration? Wayne, do you have a question?
No, I don't. I was waving at Kendall.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't do the clue right.
That's okay. No problem. Okay, if no other questions, I'm going to dive into this next section. Let's see. Okay. Okay. All right, so we're wrapping up our Q&A part. So this was a question that came up just now. So this is just things that you need on your website. So we're not talking about design specifically or any of the technicalities, which we'll get to in a minute. But what are the things that you need to have on your website? Well, you need a really great homepage, going back to Kendall's question. And I do take a lot of pride in this particular homepage because I helped create it. Hat tip to TJ for maintaining this website in such great fashion. I continue to be very proud of the maintenance of content that's going on this website. So do take a look at Thomas Jefferson's website for some ideas of how to maintain or design a really nice looking website, and also for the type of content that you can have on your homepage. Excuse me. So yes, you do need a really great homepage because that's the place where everybody lands, and that's where that first impression is really made or broken. So I've got this on the back of my business cards. I've got a couple of hashtags that design attracts and content holds. Design attracts and content holds. This is very much like it is in personal relationships. When you see someone that you're interested in getting to know for whatever reasons, romantic or personal, professional, whatever, you're attracted to their design initially. You don't see somebody and then think, you make snap decisions based on their quote unquote design, how they look. But if you approach them and then get into a conversation with them, that's where the content has to hold. So these are mantras that I really do live by when I'm developing a website. So you've got to think about it this way as well. So the design's got to attract you, and the content, it really does need to keep you interested and keep you coming back. Your website has got to load quickly, folks, or bye-bye. Zippy loading is absolutely crucial these days. Google looks at it as a ranking signal, they call it. And for two reasons. One is that we've got about 8 seconds on a good day to keep somebody's attention while they're waiting for a website to load on desktop. It's half of that on mobile, half of that. We don't have the patience anymore. So we've got about 6, 7, 8 seconds on desktop, about half that on mobile. And if they don't get what they're looking for, let's go back to that pizza restaurant. If they don't find information on that pizza restaurant that they're looking for almost immediately, they're going to look for a different pizza restaurant. Now, that model does not apply necessarily to you all, but why make your clients wait to get the information? So there are a number of things that you can do to speed up your website. We don't go into a lot of those today, but what you can do is make sure that we will talk about this, is that your images are optimized. And there are other technical tricks that you can play depending on the platform that you're with to speed up the delivery. And there are places that you can go to test the speed of your loading as well. One is GT Metrics. That's two letters, GT Metrics. I don't have this on the slide. You can check it there. And Google has its own page load speed test page that you can go take a look at. So what do you really need on that homepage? Well, I strongly suggest that you have a big image at the top that exemplifies something that's emotionally attractive about your organization. A scene from nature is a great place to start thinking about what to put there. Another suggestion would be a high quality image of your staff working with the people that you serve. I'll talk in a minute about why it's important to put your website visitor at ease right away, and a strong image at the top will let them know that they are in the right place. When I'm working with clients, I often talk about the fact that when people arrive at a website that I've created, the first thing I want them to do is relax. I want them to feel like, oh yeah, I'm in the right place. So an example is I built a website for a roofing company in Annapolis years ago. And we start out right in the beginning speaking to the homeowner who came out in her yard the day after a windstorm and found shingles in her front yard. You don't call a roofing company you call a roofing company for a new roof and also for repairs, but repairs are an easy way to get into thinking about getting a new roof, right? So what we do is we address their concerns right at the top of the website. We tell them that we got you. You can relax, you're in the right place. So don't take that headline and bury it. That's kind of crucial that you do that. And having this big image right at the top really can help set the tone. So what you want to do, follow that big image at the top or a video or whatever you have up there, is a catchy benefit-based statement. And we're going to talk about how important it is to flip the script on what you think you ought to present versus what you know that your audience needs you to present. That's an important distinction that we'll make in just a minute. So, and this doesn't have to be a mission statement. I have a number of clients. In fact, TJ has their mission statement down in their footer. That's a good place for it. But your catchy thing should be, can we serve you? What can we do to help you? You know, those kinds of things. And it has to be based on that type of information to keep people engaged. Let's see, then underneath your big benefit statement, catchy description, you should continue on down the page with images, testimonials, projects, stats, and those kind of things. But don't go on forever. Don't put all of your eggs on your homepage. It's really not beneficial to you or especially to your constituency. They want to land on your page and learn if you can help them. That's why they're there. So going on and droning on and on with big copy blocks and that kind of stuff is a huge turnoff, and people just are not going to stick around for it. So the pages that you need to make sure that you've got after your home page, your about page is probably the second most visited page on your website. Again, this is somewhat tactical and strategic, but it's also based on human nature. People want to know who they're about to deal with, right? So this is where you can include your mission or vision statement. You can put in your executive or leadership bios and resumes, more testimonials if you have those. And if I didn't mention it, for the homepage, you definitely need testimonials on your homepage, if at all possible. Remember that people want to do business with people. And so your clients and prospects are going to come here to take a deeper dive on how they can benefit by connecting with you. This is also the page that candidates who are looking for a job are going to come to learn about the organization to see if it's something that they want to participate in. This is also where funding agencies are going to come look and see if you do what they are interested in. So this is where you get more granular and more descriptive, and stay away from quick, sort of catchy types of copy. This is where you can go a little bit deeper on what you're all about. Services page, this is another key one. Obviously, since all of you provide services, you need to have a really nicely done services page. But I wouldn't get carried away on this page. I think a simple list of your services paired with a brief description and an image for each one, perhaps a video, will go a long way toward educating your constituents about what they can expect from your organization. You really don't need to go into a lot of detail here. If people are interested, they're going to click on one of your CTAs, a call to action, and make a call to find out more. So don't pare it down to nothing, but don't go on and on and on about all of the services that you offer. Another place where you can talk about what you do is in a strong FAQ section. Frequently asked questions, for me, break into a couple of different bundles. One is what people actually are asking of your organization, and things that you wish they would ask about your organization. So you can put your FAQs onto your services page. I don't think that they really should be on your homepage. I think if you have quite a number of them, they could be isolated on their own page and put that in the navigation. So FAQs right up there at the top in your navigation menu to direct people to your FAQs. But in any event, do put them on there. The design thing that I really like is that thing that we call accordions or toggles, where you see the FAQ title, and then you click on a plus sign, and then it drops open and gives you the answer. And then you click on the next one, and the first one closes. That's a really ideal way to put out information. So for the questions that you wish constituents would ask, this is where you would think to yourselves in a committee meeting or whatever, what is it that we really want to teach people about what we do? So this is actually planting questions in the heads of your constituents, the people that you serve, right? So it's suggesting that they want to know these things, so you can answer those questions. So getting back to the pizza restaurant thing again, one of the FAQs might be like, do you serve thin crust pizza? Well, if that's what your specialty is, but it's not something people always ask about, put it in your I wish you would ask me FAQ section. So next section is a blog. Now I'm going to just go into this by saying the reason I put recommended on this slide is that I do recommend it. I do realize that creating blog content, and I'm speaking because I do it myself, it is a labor of love, and it is a resource hog on your time. There's no two ways about it. A couple of ways to handle it: dedicate somebody in-house to do it who loves to write. Start off slow with 500, 600, 700 word blogs. You can go longer if you want. SEO loves blog posts. This is where you can really sprinkle your keywords throughout your blog, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but it really does enhance your SEO. So the next most visited page, I think this is the fourth most visited page statistically, is your contact page. And the reason for that is that people are curious where you're located. I often will go right to a contact page to see if somebody is US based, for instance. That's important to me if I'm getting ready to buy something or hire somebody. Not in the sense that I don't like you if you're from Europe or a different part of the world. I'm concerned about time zone. So if I'm going to have a consulting relationship, I want to know that you're at least within a couple of 3 hours of my time zone. So people will go to contact to see if you're Virginia based or if you're based in Richmond or wherever you are. because that helps them feel comfortable about your what you have to offer. So your contact page really does need to have your physical address, phone number, PO box, if that's what you use, a contact form, so they can reach out to you through that. And it's also advisable to have a lot of this contact type of information in the footer of your website as well, because as we'll talk about in a minute, your header is the same across your entire website, but so is your footer. So having that basic contact information, phone, email address, link to your contact page in the footer is a really good place to go. So testimonials. I could probably do an entire training on testimonials. The new word for testimonials is reviews these days. I have advised clients literally for decades that testimonials are among the most powerful marketing tools at our disposal. And the reason for that is based in human nature. This sounds really crazy when you think about it, but if I'm trying to sell you something, let's say that I'm trying to sell you a service of any kind, and I am BBC World Service not playing. Oh, really? Music. That's so funny. Siri thought I was calling her, so I said service, and she answered. Now she's playing me some kind of British world news thing. So sorry about that. Anyway, so the testimonials are really a great place to get people to speak to each other in a way that you can't as the promulgator of the service. It's weird, but it really is human nature. So if I'm trying to sell Kendall something and Wayne says, I already bought that thing from Chuck, and Kendall sees that, it's human nature. She's going to trust Wayne more quickly and more deeply than she does me, because she knows I'm trying to sell her something. I got to turn this British lady down. I don't really care about the British news right now, people. So anyway, testimonials really do provide a tremendous function for developing that trust that you really want to build with people. So let's see. Yeah, you can put testimonials on your FAQ page. You can put I would sprinkle 3 at a minimum on your homepage, because that's where people are going to feel a sense of connection with you. Don't put great big long ones on there. Nobody's going to read those, but just, a couple of short paragraphs or a few statements, few sentences together will really make a point about how people have trusted you in the past, and therefore new people should trust you as well. It's also fair game to suggest keywords that you would like for them to use, but certainly you want to make sure that you're leaving the writing up to the person that's doing that. The other thing too, real quick about reviews, is that they should be put onto your Google My Business. So a great tactic that I use is ask people to put a review on my Google My Business page, and then I copy and paste it onto my website. So the other thing is, if you're asking them, a client or a prospect or a past client, to write a testimonial, ask them to write a review instead. There's something psychological about asking for a testimonial versus asking for a review. So the last thing that I wanted to suggest that you have on your website is an email marketing sign-up panel. This is one that we just designed for a guy that's introducing Bridge to young folks. And so we're encouraging people to sign up for his email marketing. And so it's a good idea to be doing email marketing in the first place. And I strongly suggest that you have an easy way for people to sign up for your email service on your website. We all complain bitterly, and I know I do, about all the junk that comes into our inboxes, but 90% of it, honestly, we ask to get. So if you are in the business of communicating, which all of you should be thinking about it that way, then you do want to be doing outbound emails, because that, again, is one of the 2 platforms that you can control. And it's a great way to send out announcements and that kind of thing. So What we did here is offer a lead magnet, we call it, which is a PDF that it contains the 5 ways to introduce your friends to Bridge. For you all, creating a PDF of the top 10 things, top 10 ways to do something, the top 10 things to look out for on your farm, the top 10 things to prepare your farm for winter, or even things, another thing that I really like to do is to create a PDF, which is as a lead magnet of things not to do. 5 mistakes that farmers make with livestock in Virginia, things like that. So let's see. Major website platforms. Okay, you know that you need a website, and you know that you know what needs to go on your website. So let's take a look at the 4 top website platforms that you might want to choose to build your site on. I do have to say that going into this part of this training that I am extremely biased towards self-hosted WordPress websites, aka wordpress.org. Basically, wordpress.org or self-hosted sites are using publicly sourced or free, what's that term? Anyway, it's free software developed by WordPress. And that's one of the advantages of it. Open source is the term I was looking for. So I've just happened to have built most of my websites on WordPress.org type of software. And so I am biased toward that. WordPress.com, Squarespace, and Wix all have a lot of very beneficial qualities about them. I'm not slanted against them in any way, shape, or form. Squarespace and Wix, as well as WordPress.com, are somewhat analogous in the sense that they are fairly easy to build a website on. And all 3 are contained in what I call enclosed ecosystems. And what that means is that unlike WordPress self-hosted sites, there's nothing you really need to do to worry about the back end on Squarespace, Wix, and WordPress.com. They're inside a system that is maintained by the technical people there. So you really don't have to worry about that, that component as you do with self-hosted WordPress websites. Fees are somewhat analogous across all of those 3 platforms, actually across all 4 of them, but it varies totally on what level of service that you're on. All of them offer premium level services. And so you can go up to $20, $30 a month, or keep it down on WordPress.com to $4 a month, for instance. So all 4 typically include a registration of a domain for 1 year for free. So that's kind of cool. And we will take a deep dive into WordPress.com in next week's presentation. So if you're looking for a good place to start, I'm going to be talking about WordPress.com as that next week. So let's take a look at the popularity of these major website platforms. Just like Google dominates the search space, WordPress totally dominates the space that it's in. Well over 40% of all the websites on the planet are built on WordPress. That includes WordPress.com, but by far, self-hosted WordPress websites are the bigger part of that cluster of WordPress as it dominates the space. So I have to say that I've worked on one Wix website. The guy that initially designed it did a really great job. So it came out looking really, really great. I'm not a huge fan of the way the back end looks and works on Wix. Those of you who are on Wix, don't change because I just said that. This is a little bit like Fords and Chevys. It has to do with what you grew up with and what you're used to. Squarespace has some really exquisite templates, and they work really well for visual artists and people who, site owners who have a lot of visual type of content. In the hands of a qualified designer, I have a colleague that builds Squarespace sites with me. You can turn out some really great looking websites. This is one that we built on Squarespace for a fellow in he lives in the north of France. Very interesting gentleman. He's into peace and dancing and food and all kinds of fun stuff. And his website covers the waterfront, but I'm very proud of the way that one turned out. And it's not on WordPress, it's on Squarespace. So let's take a look at market share. WordPress dominates again at 42.5% of all websites on the planet. Shopify comes in second. This may seem a little surprising, but when you think about it, Shopify really is the default standard for e-commerce. So anybody who's a jewelry designer, for instance, is making a decision between Etsy and Shopify. Shopify wins in that particular case. These next two, you may not have even heard of. I can barely spell them. I never want to know anything about Joomla or Drupal. You may have a site built with those technologies. If you do, bless you. I don't know anything about it, so don't ask me to help. Joomla and Drupal are shrinking or remaining static in terms of market share adoption. They just are not keeping up with WordPress and some of the other platforms. Squarespace, though, it comes in close to the bottom here with 1.5%, and the same with Wix at 1.5%. These are not desperately horrible numbers because we're talking about millions of websites across the planet. So which one's best? My favorite, of course, as I've said, is self-hosted WordPress website. And one of the reasons for that is that it's incredibly scalable. This may not pertain to you. You may not need a gigantic website, and you probably don't. And in fact, if you were one of my clients, I would suggest that you not. But the cool thing about self-hosted WordPress websites is that there's some 50,000 plugins available out there that manage all kinds of different functionality, like calendar plugins and things that do automated backups that connect you to different platforms like MailChimp and other email marketing platforms. You don't want to load up a self-hosted WordPress website with a ton of platforms because, with a ton of plugins, excuse me, because that will slow down your website and also increase the chances of things going wrong because plugins have to get along technically with the WordPress software itself. So among those 50,000 plugins that are out there, lots of them are abandoned, and you really just need to use the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or so that really make the most sense for your particular operation. In the long run, however, your decision about which platform to use should be guided by what you're already using and your familiarity and comfort level with that, the advantages and disadvantages of switching, the comparative fee structure, features, ease of use, and all of those kind of things. So if you really are considering switching, let's say you're on Wix and you're thinking, wow, maybe we ought to try WordPress.com or Squarespace, go back to Google and ask Google to compare platforms. So what you want to do then is you can compare 3 or 4 at one time, but all you really need to do is put the name of the platform in there with versus VS in between each of the words, and you will get probably more information than you're really interested in. And once again, always in your search queries, put in the words 2021 and soon put in 2022 because you want to be getting the most recent information that you can. So before we go any further, I want to make sure that we all know what we're talking about with the main website components. We do tend to throw around some jargon, so I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page about what a particular component is on a given website. So this is the header that I'm showing here, basically is everything from just above the image up to the top of the green bar on the TJ site. So it's the logo, the navigation, the call us today, and the search box. Everything above the image is part of the header. The next section is the main menu, the navigation. It's also called the navigation menu. This should contain links to every major page on your website. There are some exceptions where it's okay to link to a lesser used page from within a page and not included in the main navigation. But you can see here with this drop-down menu, TJ's done a really great job of organizing individual pages underneath learn more about TJ/SWCD. So the other thing that when you're considering drop-downs and you're building your menu, you want to put these in priority order. So things that you think people are more interested in, like Intro to TJ/SWCD, should be at the top as opposed to floating down at the bottom if that's what you think most people are interested in. There's also a system of menu development called mega menus, and this kind of blows my mind. That's why I stay away from them. You may have seen these, especially on e-commerce sites, but you click on a particular word like products, and then this gigantic window opens with all the categories, electronics and software and home goods and blah, blah, blah. And then you click on those and more. Anyway, it's confusing. And I personally stay away from recommending or designing with things called mega menus. So care for a hamburger. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this term, but these three little lines over here on the right are called the hamburger menu. And this is what your website should look like when it's on mobile. This is a website that we've just launched for a local couple here in close to Charlottesville, Tom and Sarah Hurley. So what I put on here is a screen capture of what their website looks like on my phone. So the reason they call it a hamburger, I'm sure you can figure out, is that it's a bun, a burger, and another bun. So how it got that name, I don't know, but it really does describe what's going on. So that's the hamburger menu. The section underneath your main menu is your hero or slider section. And the hero space is a great place to put in calls to action. You can run a video in the background. Sliders are recommended. TJ uses a slider. They're not used quite as much as they used to be. They're a little bit resource intensive, but these days with high speed internet connections, they're really not bad in terms of slow loading. But one thing I want to make sure you do if you do use sliders is use just a handful of images that slide through that space at the top, because people are they're just not going to stick around and watch a slideshow of 6, 7, 8 slides. They used to, but statistics point away from that at this point. Let's see. So the hero image is a space where you can include a number of things. This is the website that we just launched for this bridge playing guy. You can go take a look at it at doubledummymovie.com. He's got a film out. And so we're actually running a video in the background. You can't see it here, obviously, because it's a still shot. But look at all the stuff that we were able to sort of cram into that hero space. So we're telling people right away, giving them a benefit right off. Meet the world's best pastime. That's kind of intriguing, pulls you in. And then it tells you a little bit about the movie. And then the rest of the page flows down from underneath that. What's underneath the header space is called the body, and that's where you can put in quite a number of other items. As we discussed before, images, tables, text, calls to action, buttons, accordions for FAQs, testimonials, videos, and more. All of that is considered to be the body. So everything that's basically between the header and the footer is considered the body. This is the footer for the Double Dummy website, and you can see the way we made use of it here. We've got a little description of the movie, the site map. Although this is only one page, we actually include links to different places on that page. So if you wanted to, on your particular website, you could have a site map, or you could call it popular links or favorite links, and put links in the footer that take people directly to your services page or to contact or to your about page. We also put his contact form there so people can easily reach out to my client right from the footer. Then the other two components that are part of the definitions of a website are pages and posts. And posts are part of your blog. Pages are typically static, like services and that kind of thing that you tend to set and forget. Although, like I say, you should be periodically reviewing those. So, and blog posts tend to be more conversational, and they tend to be updated or added to, in any case, more frequently. So let's take another little break here and see what other questions people might have. Let's see, let me take a look over here. If any one of the moderators want to hop in, let's see. Yeah.
Had a lot of dialogue back and forth where districts, I think, are learning from each other.
Yeah, that's
Really
great.
kudos to Lisa for sharing the free stock photo information from their website that you had posted. Nicole made some great comments about blogs. Certainly you lose some control, and as a district, you do need to remember FOIA and record retention issues. I do think you have a question. Maria, did I?
I was actually going to comment on Nicole's statement with blogs and disrespectful comments. So, because I was doing a lot of research on social media and website as it pertains to FOIA and what records we keep, and I found out that you have every right to moderate the comments, so you can delete those comments. However, you do have to keep a record of them, so that if someone can come back and say, well, I posted all these comments and they're not here, and that's foiable. And so you have every right to delete them to moderate a safe space online, especially if those comments are causing problems on your social sphere. But you do have to keep a record of them somehow, whether it's a screenshot or there's services that are available that can actually archive all of your stuff on your website or on your social media. Personally, we don't use it because we're just so small and we can't afford that kind of service, but there is, I think a couple of soil and water districts actually utilize that service. So it is available. We just do screenshots. And then if there's problematic comments that say they get political for X, Y, and Z reasons, we just screenshot it, delete it, don't even comment on it, and keep it on record just for our sake.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I really do appreciate that. That's something I haven't really looked into from government viewpoint. It should be said, and I don't know if this is the same case for Wix, Squarespace, but for WordPress websites, you do have the ability to disallow comments before. You don't have to publish everything that hits a blog post. You have the ability to just say, no, you can mark it as spam and then delete it. So I find, and there are spam assassins that you can add as a plugin. I use one that I really like that basically keeps watch on incoming comments and just eliminates them before they even get to the website as a possibility for being posted. So I just took a look at the clock and I'm realizing that I'm running behind a little bit. So if there's anything else that we should address right at this point, let's do that. And if not, I'm going to hop back into the show so I can wrap this up and still leave a few minutes at the end for questions. Unless anybody's got something they need to say burning away, I'm going to go ahead and go back into my screen. All right. So let's get technical, you guys. This is not a boring section. So if you're a non-technical right brain person like myself, stay tuned because this is really not a very deep dive into the PHP, versions and that kind of thing that go on in the back end of websites. So security, this is an obvious one. Given the constant news about hacks and other cybersecurity break-ins, it really should be obvious by now that your passwords for everything that you're doing, especially around your website, really do need to be absolutely secure. One quick note is that if you may find that a WordPress site, or I suppose this happens on the other platforms, can get hacked. Typically, what hackers are not looking for is things like credit card information and personal information. What they're looking for is computing power, so that they can send out spam and do that kind of stuff. So keeping your website safe and secure, you definitely want to make sure you have a secure password, as well as two-factor authentication, which basically means, as you've probably encountered already, the practice of having a secondary thing that you have to answer, like a security question, or getting a code sent to your phone before you're allowed into that particular website. Another thing that you can do these days is create a passphrase. These are not as necessarily as secure as a password, but you can literally create a passphrase like, my golden retriever did 21 sit-ups last week. That's an acceptable and extremely strong password. It's also a little difficult to remember unless you write it down. So it's something that you should consider using, because it's kind of fun to use those. But I would highly recommend that you use a password keeper like LastPass. That's one of the ones that's out there. So talking about the next thing on my technical rundown here are Google Analytics. Various platforms have the ability to actually use Google Analytics. It's real easy to incorporate that into WordPress sites, but it's also possible with Squarespace, Wix, and WordPress.com. But once again, it depends on whether you're at the bottom end of the pay tier or higher up. I know with Squarespace, they have an integration with Google Analytics, and with some of the other platforms, you have to pay to play to get Google Analytics. But this is an example of what Google Analytics looks like. When you go to Google Analytics on the back end, you will see a date range that you can set to a month, a year, a day, whatever you want, and then learn how many people have come to visit your site, what your bounce rate is. Bouncing is, I think it's kind of an interesting term, but basically it means how quickly people come to your site and then bounce off. So the higher the percentage, the worse you're doing, because people are not finding what they want and they bounce off. That said, though, people may come to your website, scroll down to your footer, get the phone number, and bounce. So bounce is, you got to take it a little bit with a grain of salt. So, but Google Analytics is really the granddaddy of them all as to the stats packages that are out there. SEO, this really needs to be one of your top priorities in your marketing effort. We said we were going to talk about it, so here's that. There's not much point in having a really great website if people can't find it easily. So as noted previously, people type into Google search window what they're looking for. So once you determine what keywords people are actually using, you can sprinkle those throughout your website, especially in your blog posts, to help Google help people find your website. It's a good idea to avoid keyword packing and other practice that Google will punish your website for. And it's worth noting that Google's process does change with some regularity. So it's a good idea to keep up with the practices that are going on out there. When I talk about practices that eventually Google will crack down on, back when I first started into the website world, you could do things like take all your keywords or your key phrases and put them in white type on a white background behind the page that you were presenting. And the search engine would go to that and go, holy moly, this site's loaded with whatever this set of keywords is. Well, you can figure out what happened pretty quickly. Once the early search engines figured out that people were doing that, they not only said that wasn't a good idea, but they would punish you for using that technique. So not surprisingly. So all four of the major platforms we've talked about, Wix, Squarespace, WordPress.com, and self-hosted WordPress websites all can help you with SEO. Make sure that you're looking for how this works with your particular platform, and do take some time to study some of the many, many, many articles that are out there about good SEO practices. The moon is not for sale, though, people. So one word of caution here is that no service can promise you page 1 ranking for your website. I can't do it. I do SEO, but people really should stay away from anybody who promises S1 or page 1 ranking. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So it's best to learn how to manage and optimize your SEO for your particular organization, and keep implementing best practices as things change, or you can work with a trusted contractor who is not promising the moon. So a little bit more on the technical side. WordPress is natively search engine friendly just by itself. I don't know that the others are not, but this is something that we take great pride in around WordPress websites. Search results will vary according to your location and your personalization. This seems really weird, and it struck me as odd when I first heard about it, and you can try this in your own city, especially if you're in a bigger city. So let's take Richmond, for instance. If you're on the West End in Richmond, you get out your phone and you look for that fabled pizza restaurant we were talking about through this training, you will get a different set of results than you will if you're on the other side of Richmond. And not just because you put in restaurants near me. You just Google knows where you are. They know where you are because of where your phone is. So they will provide information to you based on your location. So keep that in mind as you're looking for pizza restaurants when you go out, and do searches especially on your phone as you're moving around. The other thing about Google search results is it's based on personalization. So much like we are hearing now about social media platforms feeding you things that you tend to resonate with, Google does exactly the same thing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's in this case, I think it's actually a good thing. So if you tend to look for pizza restaurants on a regular basis, Google will tend to show you more of them. And that's just based on personal choice. Same thing with if you tend to be on your phone or your desktop and you're looking for a lot of Amazon products, Google will tend to show you more and more Amazon products. So in addition to the keywords that we've talked about that are important to have on the technical side of your website, you really do need to optimize your images for size and search. We're going to talk about that in a second. You need to make sure that your website loads quickly and that it is mobile friendly. Google will actually punish you if your website is not mobile friendly. So let's talk about optimizing images for size and search. We're going to do a much deeper dive on this on day 3. So, but for now, you need to think about, so if you've got a box that's a featured image at the top of a blog post, or a smaller box on your homepage, for instance, let's say it's 800 pixels wide. If you have a 3000 pixel wide image in your media library, the box will actually size it down proportionally to fit that 800 pixel box. So you think I'm good to go, right? Well, you're not. It's a good idea to upload images that are exactly that width, or I tend to go a little bit bigger. So if I have an 800 pixel space, I might use a 11 or 1200 pixel image to account somewhat for retina displays that are seeing twice the resolution. So I don't really worry much about getting it exactly double the size, but I do think going a little bit bigger than the space that it's going to present in is a good thing. So watermelons and snakes. What I'm talking about here is that if you take a photo with your phone, it's going to be 3000 pixels, 4000 pixels wide. The temptation is just to go ahead and upload that to your media library on your website. The problem is, although that space we were just talking about shows an image that's 800 pixels wide, the internet is actually having to deal with that entire image, which might be 2.5 megabytes instead of 250 kilobytes if it were properly optimized. So it's basically like forcing a watermelon through a snake. You don't want to be doing that because it's going to slow down your website. Google's not going to like you, and you will be punished for having a slow loading website. So Google does hate slow sites. As I mentioned before, it's a ranking signal, and they don't want to have their viewers having a poor experience. So that's what is going on with that. So they will actually lower your website in search results based on slow loading sites. It's also a good idea to get some of your key information up high on the homepage, just because as it does load, you want to make sure people are able to get to your headlines and some of your key information right off the top. Something I wanted to point out here quickly about search engine optimization is don't leave your images named things like the name of their JPEG file. So img_4828.jpg isn't very helpful to the search engines, because Google is actually paying attention to all the words on your website, including your file names. So if you write something more of a caption like specialist Amanda Pearson makes topsoil improvement recommendations to a local producer, that's going to help your SEO a lot more than just the image title. In WordPress, there are a couple of other places where you can put this type of caption that will help people with visual impairments, because they have readers that will actually read the web page to them. And a title like img_4828.jpg is not going to be very helpful. So those kind of things on WordPress are called alt text fields, and there are other fields that will help you make the best use of search engine optimization. As you might imagine, there is a massive, absolutely massive search engine optimization industry out there, because people want to be ranking on page one. So it can be daunting to get into SEO, but I do recommend that you start looking for resources that have to do with the platform that you're on. So if you're on Wix, look for SEO on Wix type of solutions. There are a ton of resources. These are some of the best ones out there: Search Engine Land, Moz, Ahrefs. There's a guru named Neil Patel who knows a whole lot about SEO. You could follow SEM Rush and Yoast are some of the top ones. All right, so no more pinch and zoom, you guys. Nobody's got time for that. They are not going to go into a non-mobile friendly website and pinch and zoom to be able to read your text. We all used to have to do that, but we don't anymore, so we don't. Luckily, your platform has the built-in ability to build a stacking version of your website. I'm sure you've seen these, and it helps that they do that for you automatically as a built-in way, so that you will load faster and give people a much better experience when they're looking at your website. When you're doing that top to bottom review, make sure periodically that you're looking at your website on mobile to make sure that it looks right and that things are stacking in the right order. Coming down a WordPress website, what's on the left will stack above what's on the right on desktop. So you have to make sure that information flow makes good sense. Desktop viewing, which we all did because we didn't have mobile phones until around 2007, but we have now back in 2016, tipped over from looking at websites just on desktop. It's now more popular to look on mobile devices. The virus did affect that a little bit, but the trend is changing back. And here's some stats. Mobile is slightly out in front of desktop viewing. In fact, one of the crazy stats that's out there right now is that people will not get up from their chair to go over to their laptop on the kitchen table when they can pull out their phone from their pocket and look something up. Guilty as charged over here. Okay, so this is the last section of this training. So if you forget everything else that I have talked about today, I want you to remember this. Your website is not about you and your organization. I know this sounds crazy and it sounds counterintuitive, but what your website really should be about is about what your constituents' needs and desires and wants are. You don't see websites about weight loss or health that do anything other than promise a transformation. So to the best ability that you can, what you want to do is encourage people to adopt your service because they will get a result. So if you're just talking about what you do as opposed to how you do it and why you do it, you will just leave people cold. That's just not what they're there for. So if you don't know what people want, ask them. Once again, send them email, conduct a survey, call them up on the phone and ask them what they need. And then use that to get more into what one of my colleagues calls, let's see, where is that? He talks about sorry, just lost my place for a second. So what you want to do then is foreground the transformation that you offer or the result that you offer. One of my colleagues points out that you should be focused on the why and the how because the what is boring. If you're selling a dining room table, having a table there with stats about its weight, height, type of wood, that's boring. You show it with a bunch of people around it enjoying themselves, that's marketing. Inbound marketing is something you might want to take a look at. There's plenty of information out there about inbound marketing, and that's really what we're all moving to these days. Transformation messages and results messages can be conveyed in testimonials and videos. Your website should tell a story. So make sure that you're going from top to bottom, especially on your homepage, and walking people through what it is that you offer. You may need to hire a copywriter that understands this. And I do suggest that you hire a pro where necessary. Mara Glazer says that she's a professional copywriter. She says that 50% of success in marketing comes from copy and 50% from design. And I could not agree anymore. So branding guidelines, we talked about that a little bit. Consistency is something that you really do need to pay attention across all of your social media, all of your publications. If you don't have a set of branding guidelines built yet, look at what you've done mostly in your print and start moving that over to your web in terms of colors, fonts, and that kind of thing. And then over time, develop an actual, it could even just be a one sheet for the types of colors and fonts and that kind of thing that you can use or should be using consistently. Steal from the best. One of my bosses said this years ago, and my thought here is that if you're going to be redesigning your website or reworking it, take a look at other websites that are out there. And honestly, after you've taken a look at some of the websites, made some notes about them, hire somebody who is, I would call design smart, because your own instincts may or may not be the right ones. So get somebody who's in your family, your colleague, or a friend who is design oriented to help you. And then just start doodling, come up with some ways to or come up with some doodles that you might want to map your new site to. But do think big, uncluttered, and open design. Those are, that's the trend that I was talking about a little bit ago. So TLDR, you probably know about this, stands for, it's internet shorthand for too long didn't read. Not only will people not read long paragraphs that go into unnecessary detail, but the fact that you place them there is off-putting and people will move on. Use the best quality images that you can. Make sure that they appear authentic. This came up in our video creation training where someone was pointing out that you cannot put in pictures of parts of the world outside of your state in particular that don't comport with what your local crop or landscape structure looks like. In addition to Pixabay, and I'm glad Lisa pointed Pixabay out, Unsplash, Pexels, and Deposit Photos are also really great places to get some good photographs. stock photographs. And of course, when I say get those, make sure you're getting things that really could be used generically, like close-ups of hands, people working together, talking, that kind of thing that could be suggestive of the types of services that you offer. Make sure you've got a clear navigation menu. Use calls to action. Big colorful buttons are really good for using your calls to action. And make sure you're linking out to your social media platforms. And then do this review periodically, twice a year, if possible, or more frequently if you can. And do watch Google Analytics for trends and things that people are using on your, where people are going on your website. There are plugins called heat maps, so you can actually see where they linger as they're going down the site. And I know I've covered a ton of information, and I kind of had to hurry through this last section. So feel free to reach out to me if some of this needs further elucidation. I suggest that you start with some very simple steps of things that we covered today in terms of best practices to improve the existing website that you've got, or as you plan a new one. After you've got that first little set of steps done, then do another set, make little successes. So let's just finish up with some Q&A. If anybody's still here, I'm sorry I went over. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if anybody has anything I can answer.
Thank you, Chuck, so much. There was a few questions and discussions around some of these questions in the chat box. Bill Fleming asked about, sorry, I went past his question. Are there tools for identifying information about people looking at your site, IP addresses, email addresses, location information, GPS information, things along those lines? And there was someone that discussed it, but if you would like to expand on that.
You really can't get personal information like email addresses and that kind of thing. You need to encourage people to sign up or subscribe to your site to be able to get that kind of information. They need to do it voluntarily. You may have heard of the term GDPR. That's this European Union crackdown on people misusing private information. So all of us really need to have privacy and terms and conditions documents on our websites, and also offer people the option to be deleted from any gathering of personal information that we do. So yes, you want it from a marketing viewpoint, but do it the right way.
Also, Elizabeth said, when you say Google will punish you, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, great question. Well, everybody wants to be on page one. And I rarely go on page two. I might go into page 2.5, but definitely not interested in going any further than that, because I figured that information is not worth getting. When I say Google will punish you for a ranking signal like slow loading, which comes from having those big gigantic watermelons going through the snake in terms of your images, when they detect that your site is loading slowly, they're going to push you down in the search engine rankings. So let's say you've got even really great keywords that people are searching for, but your site loads slowly, you're going to wind up on page 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7.
But you're right. Rarely do I move off the first page either.
Yep.
Okay, Nicole had a comment and about Microsoft, that she uses Microsoft Paint to downsize her pictures to create thumbnails. That way they load faster, which is a good suggestion. Does anyone else have any questions? While we take a moment to see if anyone else is typing in any questions, you just want to briefly tell us what the next week's session is going to be, so everyone can kind of have a heads up.
Yeah, next week is really for people who are considering building a website from scratch and are considering WordPress.com. There will be things in there that you may pick up if you've already got a website and you're on Wix or Squarespace, or you're planning on moving to self-hosted. So I wouldn't shy away from next week, but that is what we're going to be focused on. So it's going to be a deep dive on how to create an account all the way through, getting a domain, and then how to maintain the content on a WordPress.com website.
Perfect.
And then the following week is self-hosted WordPress, where I'm going to talk about a field that I've been experiencing since 2007, about how to create a website in a self-hosted environment.
And then I will address, there was a question about someone has a conflict with our third session. All of these sessions are being recorded and they will be up on our YouTube page. And then typically what we do is once that has been uploaded, I will send out an email to everyone that's registered for this. And if you have a conflict and you can't register because you can't attend, send me an email and I will make sure that you get a copy of the recordings.
Yeah.
We will, I'm sorry, we will also have those up on our website. So there will be a couple of different ways to get those, but just make sure you touch base with me.
Yeah, just touching back on the comment about the Microsoft Paint that Nicole was talking about. There are a number of tools for optimizing your images, and we're going to talk about those on day 3. So I'm a Mac guy, been that way since 1985, and I tend to use Photoshop, but you can use Preview on the Mac. Paint programs are good too. The Windows environment I'm not that familiar with, but the whole idea is to size an image down to something a little bit bigger than will fit into that window. And then there's another step that you can take, and I highly recommend this, which is to compress it. And we'll talk more about that on day 3.
Bill does have a question. Do you have a good WordPress reference that you like and could recommend?
Yeah, me. I'm going to be diving into a whole bunch of stuff on WordPress next week and the week after. So after that, if you still have that question, Bill, I'll be happy to pass along some recommendations. I go to the web and look for WordPress stuff with routine. And so I would definitely recommend you do that if you can't wait till next week and the week after.
Okay. If no one else has any questions, or again, remember, I will send out a link to the recordings for this so you can refer back to this training. Chuck, thank you so much. Everyone, we will be back at it again on the 12th at 10 o'clock. Please make sure you go and register if you have not already, and that registration link is on our website. And I'm checking again. It doesn't look like we have any questions. So if we don't, then that's it. Chuck, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed this today, and feel free to reach out to me on my website, baldguystudio.com. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them for you.
Okay. Everyone have a wonderful Tuesday.